very much for coming. We've got 3 subjects today. We've already got 3 subjects for next week as well, actually. So I'll cover what they are a little bit later. Welcome, welcome. Evening all, says Red, Howlin' Nothing. And as I say, welcome. We'll work out or talk about the rules in a minute when everyone arrives. Please don't talk. Please keep your microphones on mute. Please, please, please. Zoe, I saw your message. I hope you're okay. Evening. Hello, Nikki. Hi, Kath. Nice to meet you all. Nice to see you all. Welcome. We'll just see how many more people come in. It varies. It varies anywhere from 50 to 130, 40, 50, whatever. So you're all really, really welcome. So thanks very much. You're live on the stream. Please do not cockwomble. I swear too much. So do I cockwomble? I definitely swear too much. I'm surprised I'm not banned. I'm just good. Scene drama I'm getting on top of. You may see on my feed. I will have a look at your feed. I haven't had a look. Cinders. Hello, everyone. I'm keeping my cats off the modem this evening. Yeah, any excuse. Hi, Bear. Hey, Deb. Hey, everyone. Mindfuller. Good evening, afternoon, morning, night. That's very true. People come from all over the world. How cool is that? 68. Morning, all. See, it's morning. It's evening for us here. Mr. P, evening. It's 7 o'clock. I have to say, I've just had a little best. I've got a slight cold brewing, but it's nothing awful. But you know, and you're just not sure. I don't think it helps. So I just ate a tub of custard with bananas in it. So if I vomit down the side, just, you know, just don't take it personally. And if it's a fetish, that's fine. You might appreciate it. Ew, yeah, no, I know. It's not. Emetophobia is not one of mine. Got to be honest. It really isn't. But, you know, it might be somebody's. But I definitely have a slight, you know, and you just think, oh, I'm not quite right. I feel a bit under the weather, so apologies. Hello, Smile. Good afternoon from Minnesota, USA. Hello. If I vomit, I'm fine. Is begging for that. That's what she said. Yeah. Let's not talk about that. Right. So we have a basic set of rules here. If you're new, I'm going to tell you. If you're old, I'm going to remind you. I'm glad I ate my dinner now. Sorry, Jim. Sorry. So please do not actually physically talk. Please make sure that your microphones are on mute. I will read out whatever you say. I try not to miss a message. Sometimes I do. I make mistakes. If I do, tell me again. Say, oi, you missed my note, please answer, because I can't manage everything all the time because I'm doing it all by myself and working that out. So if you've got something, please say, hello, Lance, morning from sunny Pasadena, California. California, that's right, isn't it? I've got dogs barking, sorry. As you don't pay, I don't shut the dogs out. I hope that's all right. You quite like my dogs, a lot of you. Please don't do anything sexual. This isn't therapy. However, it can be a therapeutic space, and it is an opportunity where we talk. It's not an opportunity for you to masturbate. I'm sure you've got beautiful moist bits. I just don't want to see them, and neither does anyone else. I'm sure they're lovely. I'm sure your bits are really gorgeous, and just not here, please. That's all. You know, it's non-consensual. Also, please don't turn around and say to somebody here, oh my God, you look fantastic, or gosh, I'd like to meet you. Hey, you look hot, or whatever. Fuck off. Wrong place for it. Really sorry. Not appropriate. I'm sure you think some people are really beautiful here. That's fine. They don't want to have comments on. This is about kink. It's about mental health. It's about ethical non-monogamy. It's about queer folk. It's about all of us learning little bits and pieces together. Whatever I talk about, I really want your input. Shove it down the side. Talk. I'm beautiful. I'm sure you are, Jim. Domina Ivory, Debs, you don't want to see my bits? That's a private thing. You know, I'm really sorry if you're upset, you know, but let's talk about consent. Mind you, consent, contentious comment can be overrated as well. That's a whole other thing. Right, we're talking about 3 things today. We're talking about, and by the way, I've got next week is full of questions already. So I think I've even got one for the week after already. So it's building up again for some reason. So I'll keep doing this as often as I can. So I hope those rules and everything are clear to everybody. This will last around 2 hours. It always does. You can stay, you can leave. If you are a professional, as in you are in any form of psychology and you want a free CPD certificate, please just email me. I'll put my email address down the side. Please don't send me any other emails unless I've invited you to. So you can just write to me and ask for a free CPD certificate. You will have to give me your name, your real name, and I can give you one for 2 hours. Well, hey. I make the lead jokes, nobody else. Right, so we're talking about 3 things today. We're talking about men on the scene. We're talking about sensual BDSM, sensual sexuality, and then we're talking about pushing boundaries within the scene. So we've got 3 things. Next week, if you want to know, I think I've written it down somewhere, so I have to have a quick look. I'm not very good at doing 2 things at once. Next week, we've got expectations of women on the scene. Interestingly, I'm very conscious of the fact that so many of us are non-binary, non-gendered, like, you know, that has to come into it too, and that really matters how we identify and who we are. Then we're going to be talking about scenes and contracts, and then we're going to be talking about polyamory and all the labels that are within polyamory. So that's what we're doing next week. So similar-ish, as I say, always with a kink, lovely taint to it. So we're talking about men on the scene. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but I don't identify as a man. I am not a man. I'm a cis-born woman, identify as a woman, female. So that's quite a difficult question for me to answer, in that, of course, I can talk about observation and I can talk about experience, what I've seen, but I can't talk about it from my own perspective. So I did what any, hopefully, decent human being would do in this scenario, and I asked men. Anyone who is a man, born as a man, not born as a man, is a man. I don't give a fuck if you identify as a man. What's it like for you on the scene is what I asked. And I got a variety. I've got some inboxes and I got some people commenting. And overall, it's quite interesting how people saw the question and how they interpreted it. I don't know if any of you have anything to say. What are the expectations of men on the scene? Interestingly, I kind of want to redefine that, because what do you mean by a man? Do you mean a straight man, heterosexual? Do you mean white? Do you mean people of colour, of a variety? Do you mean, like, what sort of man? Because all of those men, whether they're queer, straight, whether they're doms, whether they're switches, whether they're subs, have all sorts of different experiences because of who they are. So I think that's really important to define as well and have a look at. So I'm going to give you the answers that I received. So someone said, on the scene, please be respectful, consent, and polite. So that's a message to men. They're saying, as a man, that's what they're experiencing. In a scene, as above, communication, boundaries, respect, safe words, and other people. This person said, identify as a dominant male. There's an exception that I'm going to deliver pain without a boundary. Cutting someone's leg off is painful, but it's not what I've ever played with, has wanted. It doesn't quite make sense, but no one they've ever played with. There's an expectation that I will be dominant and in control of the moment, of them and of myself, that I will be aware of their needs in the moment and the moments that follow during their healing, i.e. if she's in subspace and I can make her black and blue, but she has work in the week ahead, and that being battered would be a nightmare. I'm entrusted not to take it too far. A scene for me lasts as long as it takes for the breathing to clear and beyond. I'm ready for cuddles and words of comfort. This person said, online, be respectful, consent, and polite. I only talk to people with the intent of making a friend. Don't think that a discussion means ownership. If she doesn't respond, so that they're definitely talking about just female subs here as a male dominant. If she's not responded and you see she's active online, so be it. She was an online friend, not an item that was bought and owned. There's an expectation I will be fine with whatever time that person gives me. I am happy with that expectation. He also went on to say, for all those as well, there's an expectation of not judging people. I see a lot of folks say that, but later down the line, there's a comment on a picture. Most commonly, it's a girl with a black eye who may say she's been punched. I think you may have mentioned it before about white knighting, that kind of thing. I've been there before, and I also sometimes question whether this is a healthy person making an appropriate choice. That's quite an interesting judgment on someone's kink, isn't it? But I've changed since those early days, and I don't try and white knight the situation or people. That was one person's experience. Somebody just wrote privately, unaware people with power they don't deserve or respect tends to be a very accurate definition of a man on the scene, sadly. Now, do we mean that classic white middle-aged man? That person on the scene, are we talking about a stereotype? Do we mean all men? Do we mean all ages? Like, all men, that's such an interesting phrase, isn't it? Do we mean all men all the time? Okay, the next person said, I would say certainly when I first started, this was definitely an issue, and I dealt with the issue by using a lengthy vetting procedure, but personal safety in regards to the law has always concerned me. This is a delicate subject and I wish to treat it as such, but due to my gender, role, and build a claim of abuse from a partner won't necessarily be treated fairly, because and I quote others in the community who have said, look at the size of you. So this is a larger human being. Prior to kink, I did have a previous partner make fake accusations against me in the hope of blackmail. And if it wasn't for a good friend who recorded this for me in secret, criminal proceedings would have occurred. I was a naive 16-year-old who could have had their future taken away from them. In kink, I have expectations of myself, but I've always felt that responsibility for myself and my partner is ultimately mine. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, it's just how I've always felt and communicate that to them. Thinking about it, I could probably write a very comprehensive paper on the subject. When circumstances permit, I may do so. Okay. The next person said, what's expected of me is the same as expected of women and all people, the basics of decency. The next person said, I learned a spiritual practice years ago. Expectation leads to disappointment. Drop them. I'm not always successful in this practice, but that doesn't mean that I abandon it in those moments. I think that other than trying to hold myself to my own principles and the basic tenets of decency and decorum as I perceive them, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Specifically indigenous to the world of BDSM, precisely because expectations are a dangerous notion for the reason described above. So this person doesn't work with expectations as a man. In my view, asking and attempting to answer this question is akin to the old question, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? The answer is, in my view, as many as want to. So if we're temporarily suspending my disbelief in the concept of expectation, what should the expectations of men in the scene be? Whatever expectation any particular individual man feels is appropriate of himself. Of course, that caveat has bad choices in this arena, surely lead to bad consequences sooner or later, must be taken into consideration. That is to say, my answer to the question should not be by any means used as a carte blanche excuse for inappropriate behaviour by men. I always hope for men, and for that matter humans, to rise to the Roddenberryan vision of what human race could someday be. Alas, that too is an expectation, and I've often been disappointed by it. And Safi shares, surely the answer is so wide as it depends on the person and their preferences, their role, the context and the situation and dynamics. I'd agree. I think, however, the question, which I think also interestingly has been misanswered quite a lot, it wasn't so much what should you do on the scene, it was what do you think the scene expects of you as a man? Is it different for you as a man compared to other genders? Is there a different expectation? You did, like, for example, because I think the question came from a place of, do you think all men should be dominant? Do you think all men should be whatever? There was a should in the question for me. And of course, people interpret the answers the way they want to. Andy, good evening. Hope you're okay. Sorry for being late. Couldn't get my mother off the phone. Well, what's your expectation as a man and a mother? Put it on to you. Yeah. Oh, it's fine. Mothers really matter. Someone else said, I'm going to rant for a moment. FetLife has become the epitome of a popularity contest where labels are so all important that any resistance at all to change your labels because the newest connotations have changed has become too much work. People who know me know me. I'm not going to waste a lot of time keeping up with the latest definition to satisfy the expectations of a whole lot of people who simply won't spend a significant amount of their own time getting to know me so they can see beyond the labels. Debs, the exception to this is my support of your idea about adding demi to a lot of the descriptors. So I wrote a piece quite a long time ago about being demi-submissive, because we've got demisexual and I'm pushing for demi-submissive and demi dominant, because for me it's all about connection. I'm not going to fall at my feet as a queer woman regardless of your gender. I'm going to fall at your feet because my connection with you as a human being, and I'm more likely to be submissive if that connection is there. So to me, he says, that makes them a little more fitting. On the physical scene, I've gotten away from meeting play partners on FET or anywhere else for the reasons mentioned above, and because FET has helped create what I feel is some very unbalanced thoughts and ideas about what is and isn't kink. I've met more play partners in the last 10 years in public places like grocery stores, the local lake, even on bicycle rides than I ever did online. I fucking need to go to his lakes, I tell you, and his grocery stores, because I haven't met people there. I find that really interesting. In my experience, everyone has a little kink in them, and most reveal it without really realizing they're doing so. Not requiring or expecting labels is the first step. I think in learning to recognize in someone else's action. Saraswati says, where does he live? And Cass says, wow. It's an interesting one, that one, isn't it? Everyone has a little kink in them. Is that because you can talk about it or can manage? Al, I'm just going to turn you off, sorry. Is it because we can do that? Is it because he can do that? Is it because he has the confidence to bring that up? Is it And that's interesting, isn't it? Is that about being mad? Is that about confidence? I need to move or maybe look harder. I need to shop in different places. This person also says, recently I've started to engage a little in the local scene near me, most of which is organised here on FET. But I've noticed, particularly in the last 7 or 8 years, in various locations where I've lived, that going to any event as a lone polyamorous male is generally met with a lot of apprehension that in the past seemed more common to people who'd earned that kind of reception through their own actions and attitudes. However, I'm not going to take any of my partners to an event or group without vetting them first, just as I expect them to vet me. So attending events has been a slow process, and I've only gone to one real-time event advertised here on FET. Most of my play partners have no experience with FET and don't have much interest in getting acquainted with it after cursory inspections of content here. There are just too many posts telling people how they should feel towards these people, this kink, X identifier. And the general consensus of those I've tried to introduce to FET has been that so many here are focused on warning posts. They're really humble brag, pity party, look at me, is just too difficult to find that encourages exploration from a neutral perspective. Personally, I find some great content here, so why not share it? Between the aforementioned posts, but I've been here long enough to have found some great sources. For newer people, I can see it being very difficult. And when someone I introduced to FET tells me they close their account, I don't argue with them. So somebody else then said, clear communication, respect, boundaries, equality of pursuits. Like, again, I'm asking you lot as well, if any of you, or, you know, it doesn't matter what gender you are, what do you think men are expected to be like on the scene? What do you think the expectations of men are? This person said clear communication. A lot of our world is looked at double talk, filled with double talk. This means this, but doesn't really, it means this. So my expectation with kink and its focus on negotiations is that it should be less of an issue, that all involved parties can be open and honest with each other, which leads us to respect of boundaries. As a male identifying person, there are a great deal of assumptions made about me in the vanilla world just based on my appearance. Co-workers hug me without consent. People grope my tattoos or try to touch my beard. And those who don't even extend to more intimate scenarios, I expect at this point, demand that my boundaries be respected, the same as a female identified person would experience. Equality of pursuit. This one is very personal to me and touches on some of the above. In the vanilla world, regardless of friendly or sexual interest, the expectation is on me to be the exclusive pursuer, and it can be exhausting. I much prefer all parties to not only be encouraged to show and act on their interest, I need my glasses on because it's killing me, to be pursuing a void and doubting the interest of the person on the other side, only to be told constantly, oh no, I'm not into you. I just want you to chase harder. Or I am into you, I want you to chase harder. My experience, for better or worse, my experiences on FET and in the community have been a sharpened microcosm of the vanilla world. Many experiences have been perfect examples of what I want, but just as many of not more have been. I know I told you I wasn't interested, but that was because I wanted to see what you would do. And since you didn't chase, I guess you're not really into me, was a real reply. Or an assumption that I'm not interested or not kinky enough because I wouldn't just as soon discuss politics or video games or books as I would kink. Okay, and people are saying here, does anyone else constantly look at people in public for signs if they live an alternative lifestyle? I do, and some you think, yeah, surely, but I would be far too scared to ask outside of being an event or FET. I think that's an interesting assumption. How do you tell if someone's kinky or not? I mean, unless they've got it written on their forehead, I think we can make massive assumptions when we meet someone with tattoos or alternative hair or dressed in a certain way. Like, we make huge assumptions about what people do and what they're into. Everybody thinks I'm a female dominant. Like, everyone I meet, I'm dominant. Fuck me, honestly, I'm really not, but that's the impression I give. So I think it's difficult. Every time I've met someone recently, they have been in this world very deeply. They are looking for me. That's cool, Omiri. I hope that's really true. Karis, not that way around, Andy, but I've seen several people notice my eternity collar, and it's been the icebreaker to chat about kink. Yeah, so something subtle like that can really make a difference, can't it? And I mean, Jesus, I've got my slave number tattooed on my wrist. I mean, if anyone looked at it and knew that sort of thing, they might feel very differently. Who knows? And people are loving your collar, which is really sweet. Debs, you have sub energy. What does that look like? I mean, people who know me know I'm sub, so you'll look for that energy potentially, but is it there? What does that mean? Okay, the next person says, if someone relatively new to BDSM and the kink scene and approaching 40, my worries are that I'm expected to know everything, that I should be experienced. Also being 6'3" and masculine presenting for the most part, people assume I'm dominant. I'm not, I'm a switch. And I find being the dominant one all the time quite exhausting. I may be wrong here, but I feel there might be less emphasis on aftercare centered for male partners, whether we are subbing or doming too. The next person says, I personally think kink expectations don't change based on gender. I'm going to disagree with that one. Equality means expectations too. I don't care men, women, or otherwise. I think we should. I think we need to recognize who people are. Don't hurt people. Yeah, clearly, unless they want you to. Don't take their stuff and negotiate everything else. So I think it's quite interesting that kink expectations don't change based on gender. I would rewrite that slightly as they shouldn't, preferably, but I would argue that they do. Dungeon folk, perceptions are ridiculous. I really agree with you, dungeon folk. I can't tell you how much I agree with you. I met a whipmaster and asked his reply, I'm not one of you. I have friends that are, though. Always interesting. Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not one of you. What does that even mean? Or, oh, no, I don't identify as that. Or, yeah, it can be really interesting. Andy says, for me, I fear the expectations of males from my male peers is that you've got to be dominant all the time. I know probably, do you like my voice there? I love Book of Mormon, and there's a fantastic song where they're talking about being gay and they squish the box, and it's like, it's a really great song, and he talks about how, you know, being camp and who he is, and he goes, my hetero side just won, and it's just really true, isn't it? Like, who the fuck cares? Well, different world. I worry about wanting to try out some of my gender switching dressing at events. I feel really sad that you feel that way. Wear what you want, be happy in what you want. Anyone who responds negatively to you, please tell someone. They're very, very likely to be chucked out. And I fucking hope that they would be. That's not the way it should be. And I think most of us would accept, not all. I think that's a reality too. Not everyone accepts everybody's kink. Sarah Zlati says, as a dom, it is amazing how many women who identify as doms on FET contact me and tell me if I went with a really dom person, I would soon become a sub. Yes, you haven't met a real man yet, have you? That'll change everything. Or you haven't met a really dominant person yet. It'll change everything. When I talk to you, you will fall at your feet. It's so interesting. That happens a lot. Don't get me started on orgasms. Right, that's another story. So this next person says, I wanted to give this as a reply and I had to get my laptop out instead of my phone. I recently set up a group for masculine presenting folks in our local scene to talk about exactly these type of questions. Following a couple of incidents that required intervention, a few masculine dom tops found that they were in a position where they had to discuss some things very openly and with a lot of humility and vulnerability. The overwhelming feedback that they don't do this often and how liberating it was. Yay, we should all talk. It's funny that. I've been into kink forever, doing rope for many years, and post-lockdown made a conscious choice to become physically engaged in our local scene for kink events. What I've learned is that I forgot quite how ingrained in me this lifestyle is. Seeing others talk about kinks they are exploring as edge play that I consider part of our general sex life, I often underestimate and minimize how kinky I am. And that's very normal, isn't it? So it's really common for us to get very exposed to kink depending on who we are. Like if we live our lives that way, it makes it really difficult. Despite seeing new on the scene, how much experience I've built in a 12 years monogamish relationship with a hella kinky wife has given me a really broad awareness of many dangers of kink. I think experience is a really interesting word. We can have really extensive experience with one human being and lots of experience with lots of human beings. What makes each person more experienced? It doesn't, does it? It's about hours. It works in a different way. Okay, let's see what people are saying. So as a male, Twin Piss says, the general expectation that I can be the dominant for any sub, I'm at least slightly misogynistic and I'm polyamorous. Yeah, I'm the least slightly misogynistic. I think that's what he's saying, and I'm polyamorous. It's interesting, isn't it? Again, expectations. So I do think, I disagree with what one of the people said, they're the same for all genders. They're not, that there is a difference around expectation. Zoe, I love being told I haven't met a real dom yet. I would be sub and not a brat. Yeah, sure. That's the same. I haven't met the right cock yet because I don't orgasm from penetration. Dave and I have a lot of discussions about that. Jesus, I've slept with like near enough 1,000 people. If it's going to fucking happen, it would have happened. Like it's me. It's not them. It's me, and that's okay. It's really fucking normal too. If you're with me, you're with me. It's not about meeting the real cock or the real person, and that's something that people do, isn't it? They say no, you need to do this. Cass says, you guys head down here at any event and you can dress how you like. Yay. Andy, thing is, I'm rehearsing for Kinky Boots, the musical. Oh my God, are you? Well, local amateur dramatics, I'm assuming. I'm playing Dom, who's the bigot in the show, but to be honest, I'm dying to turn up in my pleaser heels. You so should. It's really good practice. It's a great show. The struggle is real, though, says Saraswati. Bigot, not bagot. I got that. Great. I can't tell the number of times I've received emails from men calling me mistress and asking to be my slave. I had one yesterday. Hello, miss. Fucking, did you read my profile? Yes. You didn't, did you? You didn't. I know you didn't, because you wouldn't even be sending this email if you had. And sometimes I engage and sometimes I don't. And then this person said, well, have you got a personal profile? I went, yeah, if you'd read my profile, it's about 3 lines down. Funny that. People don't read because we don't. We see what we want to see and we want what we want. It's not on my profile anywhere, says Grace. Yeah, that I'm looking for this. I'm a newbie, but no, I'm a switch. Then non-kink men I've met automatically tell me they're doms, but unable to elaborate when I've asked, except they like to choke. Oh, see, choking is the new kissing. It really is the new kissing. I have a massive writing about this, about the dangers of breath play, and we have to really take breath play seriously. It's one of those kinks that can cause you serious harm. And it's just really trendy, isn't it? Everybody wants to choke someone out. What do you do? Oh, no, I'm not kinky, but I love choking people out. Can you do resuscitation? Like, how's your first aid? Oh, no, I can't do any of that shit. Fuck me, all right. You can dial 999 or 111 very quickly then. Sounds actually funny, isn't it? I don't even want to be tamed. Well, people don't be. And Andy says, yes, the amount of men who ask me to be their mistress, I'm a brat, clear as day, it's in my name. Naming is so last year. Look forward to that writing. Yes, the music is great about it. It is. So this person also says, I was shocked at how few people acknowledge or understand the signs of top dom drop as well, or why it would even be a thing. I've written about this. This is a standard practice for me. I've written about drop. Drop is for everybody. It is not exclusive to us kinky people or anyone. It can happen to anybody. It happens to musicians. It happens to people who run plays. It happens to every single human being on the planet when they do something that lifts their chemicals up and they really enjoy, and then they drop afterwards. Drop is not exclusive to us. So it happens to tops, it happens to bottoms, it happens to everybody. What we've got to ask is, what sort of drop do you get? What care do we need to give each other or not? It's all about negotiation. All right, so many of the masculine tops I've met identify as sadists. They do some really heavy play that society deems horrific, and they experience the guilt of that post-scene. That's interesting, isn't it? As a man, you mustn't hit a woman. I mean, how many young boys, cis-het boys, are taught, do not hit a woman, do not hurt a woman? That's quite a standard phrase that young boys are taught. And that's interesting as a man, isn't that expectation of, yeah, but you wouldn't hurt a woman, would you? You don't actually hit her. You're not going to give her a black eye. You're not going to choke her out. And as Holly says, I'm in college, and all the vanilla people choke each other all of the time. I'm left in the corner listening in horror. Exactly. No discussion about issues of lack of oxygen, and not just oxygen, blood, you name it. That there are, if you want the most easy way to do breath play, which is the most gentle way, seriously, again, written loads about this, just squeeze the person's nose, put your mouth over theirs, and exchange breath for a while, but you're taking a breath in through your nose. That's a very slow deprivation. It's very easy, and it's a really good way to start, rather than going straight in with, fuck, they fainted. Fuck, they've been knocked out. As an aside, first responder training is always a good idea for kinksters and kink professionals. My wife and I both got it at the same time. Quite fun. Exactly, Dungeon Folk. Do you know what? If you're going to run a dungeon, or you're having a play party, or you're just playing, if you're going to do something, understand the consequence of what you're doing. Be able to step up and be able to help. Do you know what? If I'm going to play with someone and someone said to me, by the way, I'm a first responder, or I've got first aid and I know what I'm doing, I would go, I'm fucking way more likely to play with you. I'm going to feel better about that. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. I respect the fact that you care for me. The issue is, I know that. I've done all of that. can't fucking save myself if I'm the one passed out on the floor. You know, a lot of people say to me, oh, can you tell me what to do? Not when I'm unconscious, you twat. It's like, come on. So it's really interesting where we go. As Dom, choking scares the shit out of me. No real safe way. There isn't any. That one I've just told you is a very gentle way where someone can start to feel slightly dizzy, slightly euphoric. It's a very gentle version of it. At an event recently, Zoe says someone was choked out on the St Andrew's Cross, or the organisers haven't asked if the Dom knew CPR, and also she has a heart condition and didn't realise them pulling her collar as she was facing away from him would choke her to pass out. He's blaming her heart condition alone. I'm in talks with an organiser of the red flags of this and the lack of other organisers who was aware and haven't stepped up, but this organiser was only aware last week. Honestly, the shit that's going on. That's an interesting one, isn't it? If you pull on anything that is around the neck, you stop supply. It is quite simple. There are forms of supply, whether we're talking about air or blood. And when we learn to choke and we learn to stop someone's breath, we're talking about air or blood. And anything that pulls tight around the neck is going to make a fucking difference. I mean, I think that's pretty basic, isn't it? But clearly not. And that's my fault for saying that. I can be quite facetious there. Lance says, do not hit a woman unless she's consented to it or she's presented herself as a combatant, martial arts training. Safety first, EMT trained, and sometimes labelled a safety Nazi. I would rather sleep with a safety Nazi than not. I really would. Not a Nazi, but someone who's very strong about safety, Jewish woman. So risks are real with breath control. They are, and that expectation, and Cass says everyone is different. You can never be sure of tolerances. So he says education is key. Ginny, is it J-I-N-A? Is that right, Ginny? I hope that's right. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'm new to kink, but as a switch, I'm getting lots of people thinking I can be whatever they want. I can be whatever they want, even if they can quote bits of my profile or writings, they think I'm going to be open to their kink. We're always trying to convince people, aren't we? Is that male? Is that female? Or is that non-binary? Like, where does that come into anything? And often it is quite interesting how a lot of men try and convince women that they need to be doing this. This is what a good submissive would do. This is what would happen. So there is an expectation on men to be like that. I know someone always calls it breath play, control, not play, because there's nothing play about starving oxygen or blood. Let's please make sure that we keep that in there as well. When we're talking about choking, we're talking about blood and we're talking about air. Anna, better safe than sorry, absolutely. Cinder says, same here, and that is why I'm pre-mortem everyone. I'm asthmatic and have been told by so many people that the first thing they do is lay me on my back and tell me to relax. Yeah, no, definitely not. Okay, so let's carry on with what this person said. They're talking about sadists, and that actually for the sadists that no one reaches out to them for aftercare, and that's really true. We expect, especially tops, maybe of any gender, but maybe for more men, you sort yourself out, love. I would agree with that, but I think that's quite expected. I hope that we're growing, I hope that we're learning, but what we're getting is a lot of male tops who are told to sort themselves out, but actually that's a lot of energy, isn't it? Fuck ton of physical, mental, emotional pressure in those types of scenes, he's saying, and forget to ask for energy in return. Emotional energy support them through the dissonance of deriving pleasure from inflicting pain and the contrast of society's expectations. I think that's really well put. Then in the scene, there's an expectation that masculine folks cannot make mistakes for fear we will all be cancelled. It's easy to blame the top and label them unsafe. Not all mistakes can be forgiven, but living in fear of any mistake limits our ability to act rationally. Whereas fostering a culture that we are human and we sometimes fail, we aren't always perfect, and some mistakes help us grow. An important part of creating a healthy environment, he's written. That's interesting. I would actually agree with him. How do you feel about that? That we live in a society where I think people make mistakes. I once had somebody write to me saying, my Dom did this to me. And I said, gosh, I'm so sorry, what happened? And what they told me was not what they accused, if that makes sense. There's a big disparity between the two stories. What they described was a clusterfuck. Awful, horrible for both of them. And it wasn't abuse. She, you know, this person, female, said, I was sitting here, this had happened to me, I had gone into a little space, I couldn't communicate that was a little space, and then my Dom stepped in, didn't see that I was a little space, and ended up fucking me, and that was rape. How do we know where someone's brain goes if they look exactly the same and they're active? That's just awful for both of them. Horrific, because she told him afterwards, and he felt terrible too. That's a very difficult one to call, isn't it? She couldn't communicate, she got into a little space, he didn't see that she got into a little space. And they agreed always never to have sex. The issue in Manchester with a particular group, none of the Dom males are in the wrong, even though they are multiple female subs coming forward of consent violations. And yet we've all been told we are wrong and we are the problem. It happens both ways. Yes, of course it does. I really agree with that. Okay, so this person then went on to write, my worst bugbear as a man is that masculine folk see other masculine folk as competition, like bottoms or female identifying people as some form of commodity for us to trade. And we have to compete using tools of aggression, the one-upmanship in order to feel validated. People are not resources. There is no competition in King. And when we create competition, we lead by ego, not by knowledge, not with heart or compassion or empathy, but through a sense that we must achieve, and we achieve through acquisition and control. I'm liking a lot of what this person says. Society builds many of these constructs into men from an early age, that we cannot fail, that we provide, that we must not cry, that we should protect, that we should fear other men for what they might do. And while many of these things are well-intentioned, they are bullshit, and they are misogynistic too. Many, and I mean many men, are horrendous human beings. Nearly all women suffer some form of sexual assault and harassment by men. But when men hide their feelings, when we don't talk, when we compete instead of cooperate, we stand idly by while a few men tarnish our gender. The good men deserve to be heard and set an example, and those good men are stronger together. By talking about our feelings, our mistakes, by being vulnerable, not only do we create a stronger sense of self and community, but we highlight the shitty behaviours earlier. We protect those around us from the douchebaggery and cockwomblery, and we can change the perception of what masculine looks like. We almost owe a duty of care to both our contemporaries and every other gender around us to be better than the internalised biases of societal expectations. Interesting insight into men. And the next person said, I'm not the man, but I was talking to one of my friends the other day who is a male dom, and we were talking about how difficult it is to come up with things to say in the moment. And it brings up a good point. The male dom is expected to know what to say, to set the mood with dialogue, even if I'm barely saying anything. He's expected to have a plan, to decide what we are doing, what tool or what toy is using when. It's up to him to read and the reactions, to tell, to continue, when to move on to something else, to change, how to pace himself so we don't reach any yellow line. And also that he has to worry if someone's being too proud to say stop or use a safe word or to change things, and to decide when things tone down. And this person says, I've really developed an appreciation for how much effort goes into being the dom, and I've noticed in my other play partners too, is it a male thing? But all my doms have been cis men so far. That's my point of view. The next person says, I think my main desire and expectations was to be able to meet people who thought about sex in the same way I do. And beyond that, I was hopeful, despite my circumstances of being married and in an open relationship, people would want to enjoy my company. That has worked out, and I've met some amazing friends, and I love it here mostly. That being said, there is a need for patience, manners, and understanding of people's boundaries to get the most out of meeting people on here. And I believe that can be a problem for a lot of men until they learn from their mistakes. The next person says, as someone that sort of floats on the boundary of the community and doesn't always feel like they belong at their local scene, as everyone is vastly more experienced and relationships are well established, I do struggle to know what would be expected of me or even what I would expect of myself. So I just try to behave in a manner I would want of someone around me, and knowing when not to outstay my welcome. I do always have that nagging voice in my head, be careful, you're male, so keep your eyes down unless spoken to, have care what you say, filter heavily, and don't do anything that could be held against you. The next person says, the question seems too general. How about this? I'm an awful planner. I don't enjoy planning. You know what? When you have a break coming up, there are two sorts of people, those that enjoy planning and those that enjoy the trip. Not to say I don't plan at all. Today's impact, tomorrow's wax, that makes sense, but I'm not awfully considerate. I need my partner to remind me they're there. I have a different opinion of that person's writing. Next person wrote, I thought men are quickly becoming rare and unwelcome on the scene. Women in general place no value on men and are openly hostile to men. The scene anywhere treats a man as a creep or a predator, a rapist, until they are proven otherwise. And even then, any time you can be destroyed by the mere hint that you did something to cross someone, or you made them feel something they didn't want or weren't planning to. The risk is too high for me. Way too much risk with your life, your freedom, and your reputation. So there will be no married people. There will be no men here except married guys who play with their wives and play around only, and professional bulls who play. And that will be the end of it forever. really strong opinion, lots of fear there. I think a lot of men do feel that way. Offshore, so next person says, hello, Debs. I hope you're having a good day. It's beautiful but cold here. Recently divorced, I'm on the verge of entering into a new relationship with a very entertaining woman, but I somehow doubt that she's interested in domestic discipline. So I'm going to be putting away my kinky side completely. So that's interesting too. Can we not bring that into somebody else? Can we not say, hey, listen, I am kinky. That's a side of me that really needs looking at. The next person said, I had initial fear of being blackmailed. I also expected there wouldn't be many women present, and that if there were there, they would probably have different kinks to me and would probably already have been in a relationship with somebody related because of the risk to themselves. I expected a kinky woman be less inclined to be a swinger than vanilla women. I expected that there would be obvious pro-doms at most munches, which doesn't seem to have happened, but maybe I just didn't realise who they were. I originally expected that polite and detailed messages to women with similar kinks about meeting them at a munch or to talk about kink would get some sort of reply. I expected that some sort of the female presenting accounts I interact with would be troll or catfish, which seems to be the case, but how do I tell? Now I expect to be a rubbish way to get a play partner. And more about the community and acceptance, having friends, and I can open up about strange desires who can understand and accept them, even when they don't precisely share them. I expect any woman I talk to want to just be friends, unless I'm given reason to think otherwise, and that's okay, in exactly the same way as people I meet in work at the gym or anywhere. And play is a possibility, unless they say it on their account, and it can be mutually interesting to each other. If an event charges more for men than women, I expect it to be an event in which the women attendees consider the male attendees to be a chore and for the event to not be very welcoming. The next person writes, here's some stuff from my experience that people want more. In some ways, the bar is so low for how submissive women get treated that I'm surprised every female submissive doesn't have scrape marks on their knees from tripping over the bar. Ask a submissive out on a date and open the door for them, they think you want a relationship. Get to know them as a person and active listening skills, they think you're really into them. Yes, they are on Saraswati, and I'll come back to those in a minute. Play with them and get along, hang out, you have no expectation or try to have sex, they think you want a dynamic. If you pay attention to their needs, so he's talking about women, they think you're so into them, even though they haven't taken the time and energy to get to know you. Then if you want a dynamic, be prepared for the emotional blackmail of you led me on and you're a shitty person if you didn't start a dynamic. That is a literal paraphrase of what a submissive told me after we grabbed a meal a few times, and most I did was kiss her on the cheek one time. Another time I got emotionally blackmailed for giving a girl bruises, but because I didn't fuck her afterwards, I led her on and I should feel guilty for giving her the marks she consented to. There is this idea that you always want more. People expect men to be predatory, Mr. Steal Your Girl, or what you're trying to fuck everyone in the community, regardless of relationship status, if you just talk to them, at least for the first couple of years until you prove otherwise. If you are treated frequently as such, especially by the dominant men and to an extent submissive women, which is hilarious given how much I've seen men exhibit narcissistic, psychopathic behavior with gaslighting, manipulation, emotional, sexual, financial, hiding information, so there isn't full consent, mid-scene negotiation to go sexual, get away with it, usually because they mindfuck people or seek out prestige in community, titles, hosting munches. So he's saying that men of power get away with more and they do more, they're more guilty of things. With excuses being that girl is new, she doesn't know what she's talking about, while they're a pillar of the community. And she doesn't remember it correctly. Well, that's sex being themselves. So he's talking about, again, how some men are doing that. This expectation that you are some kind of person that always wants more in play or dynamic or sexually without it being negotiated or clearly communicated. And if a woman plays with you, that they'll be able to sleep with you. I've received some of the most confused looks when I've said repeatedly, I'm not interested in having sex with play or pushing someone's boundaries. After one scene, I had the submissive surprise that I didn't finger her when she gave me permission that I could, but I didn't. Bear in mind, I did not ask, hint, or desire to do anything sexual with her. She expected her permission to mean I would do it, because of course that's what I was if I'm a dominant man. Also, that we generally speaking do all these giving, plan a scene, take care of the equipment, give aftercare, but then we're treated where we want is a blowjob or aftercare or sex. So many men seem to have the main goal of just getting laid, that is the expectation. Frankly, so many men do this, it's no surprise that it's an expectation. Or they want money, play partners, more sex partners, more poly partners, regardless of actual compatibility. And that is true. Okay, let's see what people are writing down here. I'm finding this really insightful. I'm AFAB, non-binary, and I'm moving into topping with a new female play partner as they are super submissive. I'm friends with her dom, cis male, and I'm finding it really helpful to talk to him about how to approach certain issues from a dominant perspective. It is interesting, isn't it, Al? It is. Are all these on FET? Yes, and Jerry's put a link in. MF, there's an upside coming. I'm hearing a lot of negativity and cynicism. I found the world to be a better place than many are depicting. This is interesting. I've asked for input, and this is the input that I've got from men. My response is from the perspective of an S-type man, so we have a different perspective here. To be clear, I'm answering the question, what do people expect from you as a man? Instead, I'm going to put, what do you expect from the scene and others as a man? And I split it into 5 sections. Fet life. The most obvious difference is that men tend to post fewer pictures of boobs, so lower follower counts, less interaction can be anticipated. There's also an expectation that men are typing one-handed unless they show otherwise. I think that's clearly stating that men wank all the time. I think that's what he's saying. This can lead to them being treated quite harshly if they give this appearance. I will admit, though, that the obvious offenders are obnoxiously common. Personally, I worry over much about appearing like one of these people, and I end up interacting with others and their content far less than I might otherwise. Play events. I haven't attended a play event in 4 years now, so my opinion might be outdated. I would say similar expectations between men and women at play events if you take role of consideration, communication, ability to consent, etc. I can't comment on the who approaches question, as the events I've attended had organised this somewhat. The one I would add beyond that is I feel that there's an expectation that consent will be given. Not that it is assumed that consent is given, but upon asking, it is expected that the answer will be a yes, unless there is a good reason otherwise. This, I might add, is a large part of why I haven't attended a play event in years. I wrote recently about grey consent. And one of the things I wrote in it that really gets on my nerves is that I think women and all genders who are submissive, so I'm all genders who are submissive, when I think often the expectation is that I expect you to come from a yes position, so I'm just going to keep pushing for the yes. Whereas actually we should assume that everyone comes from a no position and welcome their yeses. I think we've got that round the wrong way, especially with submissives. Cass says, interesting viewpoint, as I don't think the sub-folks I play with at the events expect sex from me unless I'm being naive. Well, yeah, it's fascinating, this, isn't it? Partner seeking, this person says, there's very much the onus on men to approach first, which is a polarizing statement in and of itself. Again, there is an expectation that most men are typing one-handed, so setting oneself apart from that becomes quite important. Interestingly, I've noticed that even in female-led male relationships, possible dynamics is often a man's job to determine when to bring up kink, interest, and compatibility. At Munches, he feels this one's easy, just don't be an arse. Munch is organising, similar expectation between men and women. Again, it's interesting. So I've spoken about men, and this wasn't my question. And again, I think, where's the non-binary? Where's the all inclusivity in all of this? So all genders, being open, helpful, approachable, etc. I could argue that being approachable on the scene is harder for men dealing with female attendees due to fears that messages could be taken the wrong way. Although it does help with avoiding the "can I meet you in the bathroom and eat your ass" messages from the aforementioned group of men. I suspect that being an S-type might be helping me with approachability, lowering potential intimidation factors. So that's interesting. So do you as a group think that actually the onus is on men regardless? Is the onus on someone who's male identifying? Is the onus on them to always approach, to always ask? I often use that image of the old-fashioned school dances where the girls waited on one side, the boys were on the other, because it was girls and boys then, but even if you weren't, that's the way it was. Going back to the 1940s, 50s, and boys would have to ask the girls to dance, and that's it. And little boys in that time were very much taught to do that, weren't they? You do the asking, and you have to expect the no or the yes, and you have to deal with that. However, people are saying no, no, no. So Saraswati, Steph is saying no, Kath is saying no, and Teresa is saying, no, I've been single forever, but if I don't try, nothing will happen. Kath, I approached the last chap I played with last Friday. Mindfonder and Tingle Bliss say it's about 50-50 for the two of us. Scarlett says, I find that as a woman who does a lot of asking, it's often seen as intimidating. Interesting. Grace, I approach men at Munches and start conversation at kink parties. I'm hardly approached. Saraswati, if I see a profile that interests me, I will contact them. And Racy says, as a dom female, I've never thought this male that should approach. So isn't it fascinating how everyone has such a different experience and all these different opinions? Somebody else said, I feel like the expectations are mostly around treating people right, nothing specific or out of the ordinary. Being a single male has often made me feel on the back foot. I feel like people are more likely to assume I'm a weirdo than not, unless I have a chance to prove otherwise. I put a lot of effort into looking and acting soft and approachable. Isn't it a shame that a lot of the people, have you noticed that one of the patterns here is a lot of people are saying, I have to change how I am. I have to be different because I'm so worried about what people will think or say or do. And that feels sad to me. That feels sad that these people are really struggling with that in some way, shape, or form. More than I would be in a regular public space. It's possible that any judging of me is me projecting, but I'm always in my head about what impression I'm making. Tempest says, I'm going with yes, the penis endowed are expected to initiate. So again, different opinion. Jerry, I expect that the people who attend this workshop and or follow Debs and comment on her posts are a typical subset of men or people generally on FetLife. I think the people in this workshop who follow Debs are probably interested in more than just getting their bits wet. Yeah, maybe that's so actually, and attended to. They care about communication and consent. I don't think we're representative of the male FetLife community as a whole. And they're still commenting, aren't they? So what would your opinion that community is like then? Who would you say they are, Jerry? And personally, I think it shouldn't matter what your gender is. I'm female and I've been approached. And I've also asked people out before. If you don't go for it, you can miss an opportunity. I agree. Safi, most of the best relationships dynamics I've had is where where people approach me or shown an interest. Yeah, it's complex, isn't it? Somebody else says, my experience of being a man is simply being rejected constantly for even vanilla hangouts with people I've had regular conversations with and never experiencing the slightest bit of attraction or intimacy from women, even though I've previously hung out with. I must be clearly weird and ugly, and that just makes me feel sad. The next person said, above all, be respectful. We're interacting with people, not objects, unless mutually agreed. Polite greeting interaction will go much further than jumping in. Be prepared for rejection and don't take it personally. People have individual tastes, people have previous experiences. And sometimes, often, you aren't what they're looking for. When we get rejected, don't take it personally, don't get upset. It's purely incompatibility. Thank the person, move on. Be prepared for ghosting. Many men don't take rejection well and get aggressive and angry. And as such, many people will not end up replying to your message, no matter how polite or friendly. That's their experience, not a reflection on you. They're not interested. Let it go, move on. Become known in your community. Go to workshops, go to munches, go to events. Let people see we're interested in the community and developing skills and that we're interested in the scene and not just in it for a quick lay. Be aware that there's a lot we won't know and don't know. Don't be an arse about it if you get called on it. Thank people for the learning opportunity. Work out, develop a negotiating process. It's there to find mutual compatibility with what we want and what the other person wants. We want it through thorough enough and mutually understood. So we stay with the negotiated activities, no regrets and anticipation for more next time. And above all, try and have fun. The next person wrote, actually, I don't know. And it's a real struggle at times. I never know if I'm supposed to take the initiative or take a back seat. There's also a problem in an environment where there seems to be a lot of outgoing people. I just try to be myself and hope that I will meet people on the same wavelengths. This is a hit and miss though. It would be really good if people actually meant what they said and were prepared to back it up with their actions. To be genuine and honest goes a long way with me. Even if I may not like what they say, it's always better to know up front than to find expectations be set that then won't be fulfilled. Personally, I'm actually very easygoing and will happily change direction if it makes sense, but I really do not wish to have to guess what others want, and I'm likely to get it wrong more often than not. I struggle as I've played both sides, D and S, and I'm not sure if the expectations of men varies. I seem to be expected to take the initiative regardless of what setting I'm in, and I find that difficult. I had an ex-wife say at one point that she didn't like to see me vulnerable as she preferred me to be the strong one. Point is, we all have our good and bad days. I actually think that we would do much better if we simply forgot about genders and just treated each other people as the way we are, recognizing that none of us have the answers to everything and that it's okay to be vulnerable. Someone here wrote, I don't think there's much of a difference between what's expected of men or women on the scene or elsewhere. Be polite, be courteous, respect boundaries and other people's right to be different and have tastes. And that may not be yours. And that's what about your kink is okay. If you're new, watch and learn from others. Despite the all too common misconception, kinksters aren't easy lays or necessarily promiscuous. If you're a D-type, don't assume anyone else is going to submit to you unless you've agreed that beforehand. Treat everybody as equal unless they consent to something else. Be true to yourself, somebody else wrote. If you find acceptance, you're in the scene. One person wrote, one matter which may be a reflection of my gender is that in the 25 plus years that I've been public in BDSM communities, the number of times I've been approached about any sort of engagement is approximately twice. I'm polite, pleasant, not shy, not hard to look at in any way, and I've been intermittently active in the communities where I've lived. I'm not sure what gives about this. One thing in general is the segregation of gay men from the rest of the BDSM community in the US, which takes them out of the equation unless you seek them out, which I've never felt strongly enough identified to do. But everyone else, I don't get it. I'm generally of the school that I'm submissive, I don't approach many. And now with the pandemic, there is much less opportunity for group interaction. Perhaps there is an expectation of men or submissives that I haven't heard stated or I haven't taken in. I regard myself as a fair studier of human, and this one has me stumped. Okay, people are writing. As someone who initiates, there's a lot of responses to surprise or intimidation. A reasonable number of people take it as the most normal thing though. Thank you, Alice. Jerry says, an example, how many men have felt like have cock photos on their profile? I suspect most of the males in this workshop don't, at least not as their primary photo. I don't have a photo of mine on my profile because I can't imagine that anyone would want to see it unless I know them. And if I know them in that way, then they've probably seen it anyway. But an awful lot, oh, sorry, that jumped. But an awful lot of males seem to imagine that women drool over cocks the same way that men drool over tits. Agreed, Jerry, says Tempest. I think there's cock preference going on the scene and on places like FetLife. So if you meet someone who has this enormous cock that's incredibly veined and everyone's going like, fuck me, the amount of people say, cool, I really want to jump on that and I really love that and I love that. And then you see someone with what I would call an average penis size, and then people have a go. I don't want to see your penis. I think there's a real double standard going on there sometimes, especially around for men. So I really feel for men or penis owners in that moment, because, you know, if you've got this torso and these huge arms and these veined hands with this cock that would impale someone and literally take their teeth out, people are going, oh, I really want to try that. And you've got somebody who is normal, I hate the word, average, that's much more complex, isn't it? Because people go, oh, I don't like those sort of cock pictures. You're like, well, make your mind up. I find that double standard happens quite a lot for men, and I feel for men when it comes to that. I think that makes a real difference. Okay, so I also got some private messages as well. Let's have a look. Let me see if I can find them. Oh no, somebody just told me that they've reported a comment that I made. Really sorry, I made a mistake. It was a great comment. I didn't mean to do it. Thanks. Okay, let's have a look. So people did write to me. Okay, so responses to giving perspective. So this person said privately, expectations of men. I found this quite interesting because when I came to that, I wanted to be myself while allowing my hidden BDSM desires to obtain an outlet. I quickly discovered that whilst I identified as dominant, there's very little patience among most people. There was a perception that if you were a male dominant, you either know it all or you couldn't become a serious part of the community. I found the expectations overwhelming, and whilst I formed friendships with a few, many more just disappeared when they realized I was serious about engaging or still learning, and we never stopped learning, right? The shoulds and musts from my perspective. Be honest about your situation, about your desires, your availability, capacity, and intentions. Expect honesty in return and don't be afraid to check it out. Be kind and courteous. This one has bit me on the arse. I was accused of being a narcissist because apparently I love bombed her. From my perspective, that was intense kindness, caring, compassion, and being generous. Don't be afraid to walk away even if it isn't working or alarm bells are ringing. What is your experience? What does the impact of being male mean and how it treats you? He wrote, firstly and slightly tongue-in-cheek, I've never received an unsolicited message. You have to work harder to be accepted. In the end, only kindness matters, or that's what I thought, but it isn't necessarily true. Other males will be suspicious of you. That one's coming up a lot, isn't it? That other men are suspicious of men, and there's a competition almost, which does objectify submissives, I think, which is interesting. So like, get off my property, might actually be your property, that's okay. But that's quite interesting. Why is this competition here for men? Why is it, I don't know if, do women feel that in the same way that, you know, there are actually less male dominants out there who are actually there. So Cinder's agreed with you, Jerry. And Kath wrote, it's what creates the body negativity for all of us, whether it's dicks or tits. I completely agree with you, but there's a real body, when we're talking about penis owners here, cocks, we are talking about the total acceptance of what is glorious to someone And then, oh no, that doesn't do. And you know, we don't call enough people out on that. We call people out when it's about women. We don't call people out. Racy says, I actually find CDs are quite supportive of each other. I like that, Racy. Thank you. I wasn't aware of that, so I think that's really fantastic. I think it's really important that people are. So thank you for sharing. Penis size talk is omnipresent. Vagina depth is not just something we inherited from previous times. Yes, that's very true, Alice. I've had 4 children who could drive a bus up my cunt, I reckon. Finally, this person finishes on a negative. If this is a secret life for you, and it's for hundreds of people on FetLife, never underestimate someone's capacity to destroy you if they feel wronged, no matter how strong and amazing you feel that bond will be. The cross-pollination of social media allows that to be done quite easily. I hope this is of some small use, and thank you. So that's what that person wrote. So the next person wrote as well. I'm responding privately. I'm a 67-year-old heterosexual white man who's been involved in the BDSM lifestyle since 1996. Expectations with respect to FetLife in the community are low. In our society as a whole right now, it's actually dangerous to be a heterosexual white male. Opinions, wishes, desires, thoughts are generally ignored. In the kink community, with a younger demographic and with the attraction for people of different sexual orientations or attitudes, it's even worse. There is a very tangible or dominant reaction to anything one says that is not purely BDSM related. In addition, there is also an attitude that equates age to predatory behavior. I have observed men over 50 or 55 being condemned for things that younger men may do without even thinking about it. So there's ageism as well. I agree there's ageism. Is it dangerous to be a white heterosexual male? Dangerous, interesting word. To approach someone for a pickup scene is to invite suspicion and scorn. I agree with that. I no longer go to public or club dungeons unless I have a play date lined up in advance, and even then I prefer to go to and coming from such venues with my play date. Pickup play is out for me. The only exception to this is when it comes to actual BDSM expertise or skills within themselves. I still teach, but even now I do my negotiations with the demo bottom in front of the class. And if I'm doing something like a fire flogging session, my negotiations are group negotiations for 2 reasons. Firstly, I want everyone not only to know what was negotiated with them, but also with others. Second, I encourage questions so that everyone can hear both the questions and the answers. I did one class 5 years ago where the bottom and I played many times before. After the class, one audience member objected to the scene vocally among her friends and to the group leader when everything done in the scene actually was well within the boundaries of the bottom. The leader, out of respect for me, never brought it to my attention, and I didn't know about this till 3 years later when the leader of another group used it as an excuse to ban me from the group. She and I had some previous history. These types of things reaffirm my lack of faith. With respect to scening itself, the one thing I not only expect but demand is communication during negotiation, during the scene, during aftercare, the next day, and any time thereafter, where a question or an issue comes up. I also explained to the bottom, I don't care if she talks about any issue that may crop up as long as she talks to me first. I cannot address or correct an issue or make sure it does not happen again if I do not know there's an issue to begin with. I think that's very true. I think that's relevant, and people are scared. If something went wrong, we're really scared to bring something up sometimes. And I think that happens too. I've learned to trust my instincts. My negotiations always rack and prick. So if people don't know what rack and prick are, so there's lots of things like people used to talk about SSC, safe, sane, and consensual. This has been taken over more recently by rack and by prick. And rack is risk aware, consensual kink, and prick is personally responsible. So it's about your own information to understand that you know. Finally, something I no longer expect or hope for, I do not give a rat's ass about any of the social issues running around our community. I don't know the buzzwords and don't want to. All I want to do is enjoy good scene and social interactions with people without feeling like I'm walking on eggshells. I rarely get that feeling in a club or a venue, which is why I somebody like me have retreated to private parties where we can determine who comes in to begin with. No trolls, no drama queens, no social justice warriors, and just people who like to play. And isn't that why we all got in this to begin with? Quite interesting observations from people. Lance says, dangerous. So dangerous is an interesting word, isn't it? Dangerous. I don't think they're physically in danger. I think other people are way more in danger physically than they are. And I think the danger that those people are saying is that they are in danger of being accused of something or in danger of being labelled as something in some way, shape or form. I think that's what they're talking about more than anything. Lance says, community bias against single males bordering on discrimination. Example, quite often events say couples $30, single women free to $20, single males 50 to 60, conditional on vetting. I agree. I'm a big believer in I will go where all genders are treated the same. And I guess but what a lot of venues don't want is that predatory single person watching. That's one of the issues, isn't it? But then people can look at numbers and say, I'm really sorry, we're full. Plus the aforementioned stigma of a single male being a predator poacher. Yeah, and that's what they're going against, aren't they? Saying the same thing. Makes it hard to become involved in local community when we're precluded from participation due to being priced out or viewed as a pervert. Yeah, and I really understand that. Are you being excluded because you're the pervert? There's something, if you talk to people about, if you go cat door and on a beach, you will be followed by a trail of men. If you go to clubs, you will be followed by a trail of men. It's quite interesting. And it's whether, what are the rules there? Should those men be allowed to wank over people, wank over things that are happening? What's the consent and what does it look like? So for me, that's more about the club rules, about that particular place's rules and what that means. It's very easy to feel very overwhelmed, and swinging parties can feel very different. Mark says, I've seen posts in Findom boards about not approaching subs who are under consideration. So that's an example of similar sense of owning competing for subs amongst other women DOMs. That's a difficult one, isn't it? Because everybody has a different agreement. I remember being in a party about 20 years ago. I always wore white to parties. I don't wear black. That was very untrendy then. It's more trendy now. And I think it made me stand out in that it's fairly obvious that I'm submissive. And I was with my partner at the time. So about 20 years ago, 15, 20, whatever, it doesn't matter, does it? A long time ago. And this female dominant who was standing next to me, she looked at me, she said, get me a drink. Well, that's how she just said to me. And I said, get your own fucking drink. And she said, I beg your pardon. And I think times were a little bit different then as well. She said, how dare you talk to me like that? And she looked at the dominant that I was with and said, are you going to let her talk to me like that? And he said, I think she's doing just fine talking for herself. And I said, you don't know me, you don't own me, you have nothing to do with me, you don't have the right. And I was quite interested that he actually let me have that voice. That was interesting, especially in them their times. Cass, Alice answers, that would not be marketable either with new engine or the one that has seen the road, just another thing we inherited. Lance, Cass says, that is discriminatory for sure. Many events in the UK do non-gender based pricing now, which we hope for. Who does not hate this different price ticketing? Lola says, swingers events tend to have wide-ranging price differences, however, they tend to describe it as subsidising underrepresented groups. Jerry says, a predatory single person watching is taking the sort of, is exactly the men I'm talking about. They exist and they are plentiful. Or Magnum says, only wealthy perverts allowed. And all of these things are really relevant, aren't they? So there is a big impact of how we classify men on the scene and what that means. And also, I think what we're learning is that a lot of them feel that they are really harshly judged, that they feel that there's too much onus on them and that they can't quite do or don't want to do what we're almost expecting them to do. So there's a lot of that going on as well. So next week, we're doing expectations of women. So have a look at that. Okay, we're going to talk about sensual DS. Sensual dominance, sensual sex. Is anyone here a sensualist? Anyone here like sensualism, sensual? Do you know what that is, what the difference is? Anyone here really into that? Lola says, I do. Jerry, was that you talking? I just heard the voice.
I just said, I think so.
You think so? So both of us at times. Lola says yes. So lots of people are saying yes. Roy's saying yes. Alice, ditto. Tempers me, absolutely. What is sensual dominance, sensual BDSM, and sensual sex to you? Grace says, I've struggled to build connections with men via FetLife, as most men seem to wank sex, penetrative sex, even though it's clear on my profile. And I tell them I'm predominantly into sensual stuff, with the exception of an emotional connection. I really respect that, Gracie. Yes, I am. Jessica, please explain short, if okay. Yep, going to go into it in a minute, I promise. I'm with Jerry, I think so. What's the actual definition? Using the feather instead of the whole chicken. Yes, that used to be, I think that used to be a definition for a pervert, wasn't it? You know, you think a feather is a pervert. I think using the whole chicken is. A friend of mine used to like that. So sensuality, that's interesting, isn't it? So can we do sensual BDSM and can we do sensual sex? Well, we're talking about the senses, aren't we? We're talking about how we want to be sensual, what that means. So it was talked about many years ago about how we define it and how it is. So Safi says, I define sensual play as using someone's senses, hot and cold, with wax, eyes, food, and taste, whispering. And Roy says, I started with sensual play before I discovered such enjoyed pain too. And that's interesting, isn't it? So what does that mean? So we can still control, we can still train, we can still respect, we can still create an interesting relationship without punishment, without pain, without harshness, without hurting. We can do it sensually, we can do it emotionally, we can do it with disappointment, we can do it with expectations. However, with sensual play, we also have to be very aware that actually, hang on a sec, does that also mean verbal harshness, name calling, different things? So it's going to mean different things to different people. When we talk about the senses, we talk a lot, like people talking about temperature, we talk about touch, we talk about taste, we talk about the senses that we use, when sensuality has a softer, gentler feel to it. So if you think about parenting, there are two styles of parenting. There are many more styles of parenting, but I'm not going to go into the psychology or the principles of parenting. Some people are very harsh parents. They're a bit more, I don't know if anyone's seen the Father's Day version with Jada Pinkett Smith interviewing Will Smith on the red sofa. And he talks about how he was brought up as a young man, and his father was, you do it or you fucking die trying. If I sent you down the road to go and get something, you fucking well get it for me, or I want to find out that you died trying to get it for me. And he gave the example of asking his son to go and buy him a packet of cigarettes. He had to learn very differently with his children. With his first son, he was very prescriptive, very army-like, punishment, power-based. And he tried that with Jaden a little bit, and that worked with his son. But then he really struggled with Willow, because Willow said, but why should I do it if it hurts my feelings? I don't want to do it anymore. I want to be different. And he had to learn a completely different form of parenting that was much more respectful of the situation. So, and the care was slightly different. Now, I'm not saying with pain that there isn't care. Of course there is. It's just got a different perspective. Some subs enjoy pain. I tend to gravitate towards those that prefer to be adored or caressed when they're estranged, rather than those that want to be hit or told what to do. I think I'm a sensual top. I don't call myself a dom for exactly that reason. Yeah, completely that. So this is about, how do we respond to this other person's needs who want something sweet and gentle and kind? So it's slightly different. It's not intense in its discipline. It can be intense in its pleasure and feelings. If we're telling someone off, it might be that, no, I feel really sad that you did that. I feel let down, which is very different to, you fucking worthless cunt, get on your knees and beg for forgiveness and here's 20 lashes. There's a different enough harshness of that. Mindfonder and Tingle Bliss says, Mindfonder says, I enjoy opening up a person by opening up their senses, usually gently. Yeah, exactly that. So it might be that we use different things for time. Some people like ropes and chains. Now, ropes can be softly used, but so can silk, so can scarves, so can different forms of touch. And silk and scarves, the sensations over the body can be used really differently. And we can heat it up in our hands, or we can use it in a very cold way. We can use hot and cold, ice, heat, different things. A flogger, says Lance, can be used in a soft, sensual manner by simply not snapping the wrist. Not everything needs to be about pain, silk rope instead of him saying the same thing again. It's all about setting the mood of the scene appropriate to the desires of the person. Yeah, I agree with you. So it's the softness of it. So like, you can very gently pull even the most vicious of whips and like lollipop type sticks. Those lollipop whackers, I don't know if you know what they are, but they're on there's normally a piece of wood or metal at the end of a very long, plasticky, flexible, and you go boom, and it goes poof, and it comes out of the mark. But we don't actually have to, oh, that's all right, nice kitty. See you later, you're very welcome. Ciao. We can just touch someone with that. We can stroke. It doesn't have to be brutal. I like ropes and chains, but tenderly, exactly. Tempest says, I'm disappointed can be just as crushing. Absolutely, of course it can. That's what I'm saying, words really matter. Negotiate. Most parents think I'm disappointed is better than hitting someone. Actually, some people would prefer a temper and a real understanding of it. I'm disappointed can be absolutely crushing, I agree. Or for example, the situation, the submissive's body can be controlled fully by controlling the whole environment in subtle ways, which nevertheless absorbs their full attention. It's all, we can put different music on. We can put different whispers in someone's ear. We can really change the way we do things, like blindfolds, increase senses. Tying someone up can increase senses when we add different ways of doing it. So it's slightly different in its form of control if we're using BDSM, or its form of play. We can use all the same tools, we can just use them in different ways. So it's all about sensual. It's tenderness. It's more tender. Like if you're tying someone up, you don't put them in the most painful position, or a hog tie or something. You might position them more gently or more kindly so that they can move slightly. So there's more sensuality. And does wrestling fit into this? I think wrestling is pretty aggressive. I wouldn't say wrestling is sensual. However, it might heighten your senses. You might really enjoy that. So what's the difference for us between senses and sensual? I find sensual is impact as GFD is to DS. Does wrestling? Yeah, sorry, I've answered that already. Yes, so it's sensual is also about creating a scene. It's about building something up, and of course, so can harshness and lots of pain play. So it's using slightly different words in a different way, and I think the words gentle, caring really matter. Now, you've got some submissives who will absolutely respond to this, and some dominants who will absolutely respond to this. The anticipation of possible pain or command can be a powerful thing, even if pain does not come, and the order is said in a whisper, but so can the anticipation of touch. And I think it's really good to play with darkness and light. I think if you just play heavy all the time, in some way, shape, or form. Oh, I'm sorry, Dominus just asked, what does GFD stand for? Gentle femdom, says the writer. So again, we can just be for that gentleness. I think playing with dark and light is really important. It's just as important. So sometimes it's really good to change it up. If somebody's expecting something brutal, it can be really powerful to do something gentle and sweet, as again, consent. And then vice versa. It's really good to mix things up sometimes. So gentleness is a really good thing to use. And a lot of people really underestimate it. You know, when I know you can get out of those ties, I know that that's a really easy thing for you to do, but I'm asking you not to. God, that's quite powerful, isn't it? I'm asking you to stay in that position. I'm not going to tie you up today. Please just stay there. What? Just, yeah, whatever happens, just go back. Please be a good girl, be a good boy, be a good kitty, be a good dog, whatever, it doesn't matter. To actually ask for something different. Steph Counselling says, agree, dark and light is a good balance. It's really good to play with those sensations. Cass says, our skin is a complex mechanism for detecting different forms of touch sensation, often overlooked as to how it can be manipulated. It's the biggest organ in the body. It is huge. Why don't we play with it? It's like electrics. People go, I don't want to do electrics. If you've got a good violet wand, or you've got a Prof's magic box, or you've got anything that tens machines, different things that you can play, they can either brand you. So like a tens machine with the right instrument can write, you can actually brand someone. But if you turn them right down, they're just a very slight stimulation on the skin. Like if you touch yourself and it's firm, it's a very different feeling to you just running your fingers gently, which makes you go a little bit more. There's a gentleness to that, and that can be really good, and that can be incredibly dominant. Mindfulness and Tinglebiss say a slight touch can be as shocking and as powerful as heavy impact if the right anticipation leads up to it. Exactly. It's like, we're going to start now, and then you wait and you have silence. And then you just take a gentle touch, or a gentle, like if it's some of those metal things like rope tiger daddy and different people make on FetLife in different places, like nails, claws, everything. We don't have to rip someone the fuck apart. We just have to gently touch. Oh, I'm asking you to stay there without being tied plays into my subside. Exactly, Jerry. But my top side saying, no way, you ain't going nowhere. But actually, which one's more powerful? I tie you up so you have to stay there, or I request that you stay there and you do. I know which one smacks the power for me. Don't move, no matter what happens. Okay, no matter what happens. And it could just be that you gently kiss their ear and they move because it tickles, and you say, I ask you to stay still, come back. Like, it's really interesting what we can do with gentleness and sensations. A good DS scene says Mr. P can be akin to playing a musical instrument. Depth, tonality, tone, and temperature are just as important as volume. Exactly. There's a bit when you really need to rap and thump it out, and there's a bit where you just need to listen to that beautiful sound that's gently going up and down. Oh, I love that so much, says Priza. I'm Electric Bunny. Says Tingle Bliss. Yes, but it can be really soft and gentle. It can be just a sensation. Joe says I'm a switch, different strokes for different sides of me. Yeah, it's really important to try different things, to try and make sure that you can also go for reward, not punishment. You might find it too hard. So sensual domination can be very sweet. It can be about reward. You could be playing with littles and do it slightly differently. It could be like the toys we use. You can take a dildo and really hurt someone with a dildo. You can also very gently move it into someone's body or play with things differently. It's all about using those senses. And I think most people don't use sensual play enough on the scene, which actually makes me really sad. Why not use it some more? Because it's a great thing to do. It's such a great thing to do. Why not? So gently, if we change the voice, if we're always get down, do this, do that, imagine how out of sorts and discombobulated someone can feel by saying, hi, sweetie, I just want you to sit. Or it's such a different approach, and it's very confusing to people, and it can be really, really impactful. I can do the whole do this now, bitch, but mostly I'm in all can you do this for me, please? Yeah. And even if we don't say please, I really want you to sit still. I really want you to stand. And low effort in terms of physical exertion, mental, yes, because people were just moaning about how difficult it is to be in charge all the time. And of course, sensuality can also play with power. I really like switching power in a moment when I was a switch many, many years ago, if I'm doing something very sensual. And that is, so when you do that, it's very soft and sensual. And that is, if you're in my position, what would you have me do right now? If you could be me, what should I be doing to you right now? What's your biggest fantasy right now? Talk to me. What could happen? And then you do it, but not quite in the way they want. You play with the sensuality of it. There's so many things that you can do, and so many cool things that you can do, and so many things that are out there. And of course, what you're playing with there is psychology. You're playing expectation against delivery. Don't get me wrong. If you promised I'm going to beat the fucking shit out of you tonight, it's not always great to create disappointment. People can walk away and go, oh, it wasn't quite what I wanted, it wasn't as good, or whatever. If they needed that, if it's cathartic for somebody, they needed that cathartic experience for themselves. Works differently. So I would really recommend trying sensual play. It gives each other a break. It's quite nice. Just a really good massage can really help someone. Why wouldn't you do it? Even as a dominant, why wouldn't you want to make your sub feel good or better, and you too? It's not a bad thing, is it? We don't intentionally just go out to hurt. Mindfulness says a firm whisper growl can create some shivers, I've found. Absolutely. Or a whisper or a slight touch near the ear, or the repetition. That's why people like the sound, what's that called? The sound stuff when they click their nails and do all the stuff on the microphones. I can't remember the name of it for some reason, it's gone out of my brain. That's why people love it. Thank you very much, Safi. AMSR, people love that when we're playing with sounds. And of course, restricting, like by putting headphones on and doing a very light touch, even with a pinwheel, can be really delicious, sweet, gentle. It's quite intoxicating sensual play if you really get into it. It's really good fun, and can feel really nice if you're really exhausted sometimes as well. Putting someone in ASMR, thank you. I knew what you meant eventually. If you put somebody in a bath and you wash them really gently, and they're ever waiting for something quite awful to happen, you put someone in a shower, you put gentle music on. Like, we also know, for example, through research, that people who listen to classical music while they do homework actually do better than listening to any other form of music. So to put classical music on instead of that really heavy music that you might put on for a play session also will put that person in a different frame of mind. Dawning, Andy says, yes, as much sometimes I want to be sadistic if I'm topping with my partner. I absolutely love a good spoon as well. Yeah. Lance says, playing music is a great analogy. Dynamics, case in point, Buddy Rich only knew how to pound on the skins, which made him a great soloist, but lousy to play with because he only knew how to be the loudest in the room instead of dropping down so others could play with him. It's never only about you being subtle, can be far more profound than screaming so that others have no choice but to see, to hear. And mindful narrative will say the best villains don't raise their voices, but terrifying despite. And also, it's a good way to get attention. There was one point where I was working with like 80 kids in a room continuously because I used to put on shows for children with needs, educational needs, behavioural needs, all sorts of things. And people would always say, you can't teach them to do that, it's too hard. Only if you fucking think it is, I tell you. And I was teaching a 3-part harmony to Christina Aguilera's "Because I Am Beautiful No Matter What They Say." And I was teaching these kids words, 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 just a very simple, just 3 parts above, really, really simply. And I noticed that a lot of the room weren't interested, and I really wasn't in the mood to shout that day. I really didn't have the energy. So we just started singing, "Because I am beautiful, because I am beautiful." And eventually everybody in the room came to us because that's the way we started. You can draw people in with gentleness just as much as you do with viciousness. And it can be really discombobulating. So it's something I would really recommend to anybody who wants to do that. I would really go for some sensual play, go for the darkness and light. Yes, a bit of Bach instead of smack my bitch up. I hasten to add, I struggle with song. It just seems too violent to me. Yes, some are absolutely horrific if you listen to some of the actual lyrics. Okay, let's spend the last bit on talking about, and this one is a real bother for me. So pushing boundaries in a thing. What does the word boundary or limit mean to you? So when you hear somebody say, these are my boundaries, these are my limits, this is how I work, what does that mean to you? What are your thoughts and feelings about boundaries and limits in play, in sex, and all of those things? What are your thoughts on that? Something that should not be crossed. Is that a boundary or a limit or both? It means the limit, not a target, says Safi. Kara says something that should not be crossed. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you probably know where I'm going with this. It seems to be a lot of the time when you tell someone, I have this as a limit or a boundary, I don't want to do it, it's a limit, says Grace. We have boundaries and limits in rules. We have somewhere where we want someone maybe to go up to or never to go to. They're slightly different. I think we need to define them, whether we've got hard limits, what that means and what happens. And there are a lot of people, difficult is when you're told where someone's limits are and they ask you that you push their limits. I will come to that one in a minute. A lot of the time people write, which really bothers me, you really have to push your subs boundaries. You really have to push your subs limits in order to be a decent dominant.
Oh, I knew again.
Lola says, for one, a telltale sign of someone who is clueless, therefore potentially dangerous, is when they announce that the first thing they want to do is push boundaries. It's such a fucking myth. I don't need help in growing. If I want to grow, I'll ask you to grow. I don't need help in forcing me to do something that I've clearly said that I don't want to do. Look, we can turn around and say, yes, but we're training somebody, blah, 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 in order to be a decent dominant. I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, I know. A limit is where to stop. Once you've said you want to explore something, then the conversation can start, says Melanie. Temper says hard limits are inviolate. Soft limits are pushable if it's agreed at the start of a scene. Boundaries are there for a reason, says Lola, and Cinder says agreed. I've left people who take that approach well alone. It's such a myth of, in order to train you, I needed to push you past where anyone has ever taken you before. That says more about the dominant who wants to be one of those firsts in your life and wants to stand out apart from anybody that ever has done. It does not make you a good submissive or switch as a sub when you are subbing if you don't want to do something, if you fucking say no. That doesn't make you a good or bad, it makes you a good human being. Respecting when somebody says no makes you a good human being. We often hear, oh, you know, I want to help you grow through this. I want to do this for you. You need to learn this. You've got to do that. It says everything about you and not the other person. People usually have soft limits and hard limits. Last one is not to push. It's not to go anywhere near. And Mindfulner and Tingle Bliss says, I love to help with growth. That's a negotiation, though, not a headlong rush to bust limits. But it's interesting because if I don't want to grow, you don't have to help me grow. I might not see that as growth. It so depends what we mean by that. Racy says, it's challenging as a dominant. I find subs enjoy having their boundaries pushed, so I need to balance between pushing their boundaries enough but not too much. Yes, I'll come back to that one in a minute. However, if this develops organically in a dynamic, then I've had my boundaries pushed and it opened up a side of me which is dying to get out. It's a gradual process. Yep. Cinders, from my personal experience, the only dominant men that have told me that they want to push my limits have been extremely predatory. Well, the sentences, says Alice, that start with you have to. Look, most of us enter a dominant relationship or enter BDSM because we want our normal expectations and our normal experiences to be pushed. We want to experience something new, something different, something we haven't done before, something we want to try and grow in. And we want to understand what our boundaries and limits are, especially if we haven't done them before. If we want to, if you just push a limit, you are, Roy, bullshit. I like to understand the reason for a hard limit. This is often because of a bad experience in the past. Yeah, can be, maybe not. I don't know. Depends on the situation. Can you tell me why? Can we talk about that? No, I don't want to. That's fair as well. Don't cross the line. When someone says I have a soft limit, that's a very different conversation. We have to be very careful about that. Tempest says, I refer to a specific fisting. Most women will put this as a soft limit until they see my hands. Yeah, maybe. Kath says, thank you, Debs, I must depart. Listen, your hands aren't a problem unless they're bigger than a baby's fucking head size. We can stretch. We have the capacity. The question is, do we want to? And what are we scared of? That's the real truth at the end of the day. Racy says, when we talk about boundaries, we always think about the sub, but also Dom has boundaries. Yep, coming on to that in a minute. There are some lines I don't want to cross with my sub, even though he might want to. So sometimes that whole thing of I want to push your boundaries can be a real red sign, can't it? Listen, there are boundaries in relationships. There are boundaries in play. There are boundaries for us as human beings. I don't want you to out me to my family. That's a very strong boundary. I don't want you to talk about this here. I don't want you to treat me like this in public. All of these things are very different compared to just play. So like people are saying, this isn't just about the actual play. It's about life too. I want how you treat me in a relationship, what we're going to do, how I treat you. I really agree with Racy here that boundaries and limits go all ways. The amount of people who are submissive who scream, but you need to do it. You've got to because I want to do it. You can be infringing upon the dominance or the top's boundaries and limits as well. And that's not okay. We've got to be really respectful of that. We might find more comfort the more we get to know someone. And the more we get to know someone, we might have always had that hankering or that harboring for I really fancy that. But if on the first scene you go out and that's what you tend to do, and all of a sudden you've fisted someone, they've never had anal sex before, you've fucked their ass, you've outed them to their family because you've taken the pictures, you've put them on their Facebook, fuck knows what, you've probably done a lot of damage. We don't need to do that. We have time. All this stuff can be built up. And Tempest says, absolutely, Ray. So I usually have more limits than my subs. I'm not a kink vending machine. We talk about that a lot, vending machines, don't we? And it should be talking about, that is a should for me. It should be spoken about from both ends of the spectrum. Top all the way to however the top is and the bottom is. It's about respecting everybody. It's about caring for everybody and making sure that when we sit down that we say, these are my limits, these are your limits, what do they mean and what do they look like? And then we can renegotiate limits. Later, we can renegotiate like 3 months, 6 months. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at where we are. Is there anything you wanted to try? Is there anything you wanted to change? Please use that word. Not, is there anything you wanted to push or go for? Just simply ask, well, is there anything on your limits list that you would like to change or work with? What would you like to have a go at? Not have a go at. It doesn't even have to be about pushing. Lola says, oh yes, it goes both ways. Anytime I encounter a fantasist who comes at me with mistress, I have no limits. I tell them I want them to shave off one of their eyebrows, just the one. Amazing how quickly they develop limits. Or give them £1,000. That's always a good one. Oh, you've got no limits. Or I would like you to send, please do send me your little finger in the post. Or ask for money. Yes, exactly. No limits. Of course, we've all got limits. I, for example, I hate being bitten. I don't know why. I don't like being bitten. Same as I don't like being pinched. I don't want you to shit on me in any way, shape, or form. That's not for me. I'm not going to shit on you. I'm really sorry. That's one of my limits. I mean, actually, if you paid me enough money, I might shit in your mouth for you. That's a different form of limit. I'm joking a little bit. Oh, I don't know. We've all got a price, haven't we? But I don't want to do that. Like that's not my thing. And actually, sometimes my limits are, as people are saying here, I can be quite extreme. I like being punched. I like a black eye, and I really understand that loads of people don't. And I meet a lot of people who don't want to punch me or hurt me. I usually respond with, so if you're okay if I shoot you in the foot, everyone has limits. Oh God. We're not allowed guns over here in the same way. Right, I have to disagree with your approach here. Limits, boundaries are to be respected, not dissected. The process of discussing them in greater detail may come into conversation as relationship develops, but they should not be seen as a to-do list. I think eventually when you get to know someone, I agree with that. So I think eventually, like in 3 months, you can say, I can understand why that limit was there or what's happening here, because you've developed an understanding with somebody, rather than seeing it as something, well, why won't you do that? But what if it's trauma? What if it's something that somebody really doesn't want to talk about? And actually you're encouraging dishonesty, which we don't want in a relationship, because the person will lie or go away and not be okay and feel violated and pushed. So we have to be very careful about how we push people to ask them about their boundaries. Pushing is an interesting word. Oh God, should we even say that? Sometimes people get bored. That's not a time to push, that's a time to mix things up. Let's change the words that we use. What is it we could both do? How is it that we could work with this? What could we do? If people are getting very just commonly used to things, I think there's a puppy coming in. Hi, puppy. Everyone say hello, duck. This is duck. Lance, so if you might be into kink, if you use the purity test as a duck, thanks, as a checklist. Look, there are lots of checklists that we can use that are really fantastic, and you can find them anywhere. BDSM checklist, you can add all your own ones in it as well. What do you want to do? If you're becoming really predictable, like if they are literally, as soon as they get into bed, they're in the right clothes, in the right position, or they're in the right position because I've got a goose as well. They're both down there. I know you're going to grab my right boob, that's my left, but and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to come inside me when we do this position. So it's really difficult. We really need to work with that. Predictability is a real killer of relationships. That's not a time to then push boundaries. That's a time to mix things up, to try some different things, to have a fucking discussion about what do you want. Someday, if you haven't had a conversation, could you have a Zoom on what it's about bruising, black eyes, and intense physical pain that people find attractive? Personal declaration, right? Okay, let me just write these down. Besides limits, we also have triggers. Okay, triggers and intense pain. Why is it attractive? I mean, that's interesting. I don't think, for me, it's not the intense pain of the black eye that's attractive. It's the black eye afterwards. It's the mark. For me, it's the badge, and I quite like it. And I like the fact that I've pushed a boundary. So I'll put bruising and eyes. Bruising, black eye. So we've got 2 weeks covered up. And I would agree that for some people it can be endorphins. For some people it can be the rush afterwards. I would agree with that as well, Karis. Okay, so when we're talking about pushing boundaries and limits, it's really sensible to go with a fucking good list of boundaries and limits when you first meet someone. Nobody is limitless. I've never met somebody who's limitless, never. Even people say, please will you cut off my testicles? Please will you cut off my penis? It's men who ask for that. I've never heard, God, actually, please correct me. That would be great. Who's the black and white one? Oh, you can't see it. I've got a Luna as well, so she's really huge. I've got a white long-haired German Shepherd as well, but she's purely white. It's a really good idea to have a set of boundaries and to start small. One of the things I advocate all the time when we're talking about BDSM and the way we play and what we do is I would rather leave someone wanting more than regretting what they did. So I'm a really big believer in kind of under promise but over deliver in a positive way, rather than going straight in and saying, I've done the whole of my toy cupboard, I'm absolutely fucking shattered, and I hope it was good for you to hear that it wasn't good enough. Start small, it's really important. I don't understand anybody who goes straight in and says, I want to push your boundaries straight away. What you're then talking about there is assault. What you're then talking about there is somebody sexually, physically assaulting somebody in a moment. I know the person that asked this, so I don't know if that's where it is. And if you have different boundaries, I think one of the rules you have to remember always is the more restrictive boundary that the one person has becomes your joint boundary. So for example, what I mean by that, if you turn around and say to somebody, I'll come back to that one, Andy, I promise. If you turn and say to somebody, I want protected sex, for example, so I want you to wear a condom, and the other partner says, but I don't want to. The more restrictive one, you wear a condom. That's where you go. You always go to the more restrictive one. You never go to the one that's the more open, and that's where you start. You might be able to have conversations about it. You might be able to have different conversations about it later if that relationship develops, but you always go to the more restrictive boundary. That becomes your boundary as a couple. I often meet couples who don't have sex, for example, regardless of their gender. And when they're not having sex, they might say, but I want sex. They should have sex with me. No, they shouldn't. The more restrictive boundary is the more important one. Andy says, I'm really scared to write this. I had a situation before Christmas. The person involved was really drunk. I just felt the vibe wasn't right. I was being groped, fondled when I really wasn't in the mood, but no, wasn't being listened to. Things really quietened down, but I really started to get scared. There was just the two of us. No one could see what was happening, wasn't right. And you start to think, if this goes wrong, I've got no one to back me up. It really gave me an insight into understanding as to how women have felt and build up to a rape situation. It really upset me as I just had visions of something really going wrong. Thankfully, I was pretty sober and able to control it. Yes, I thank you for sharing. I really value that you shared, and I understand that that was pretty scary. And I know a lot of women who have felt that way. I have felt that way personally as well. If you feel that situation is really bad and you have your phone, I'm not saying you should ever use it, and it is not illegal in the UK, press record, because that's going to back you up with the conversations that you can have if you can, especially if the person is really drunk. I have such an issue with any, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm a don't drink and kink kind of gal. Don't drink and kink, don't drug and kink. If you have, look, if you have a situation, one of my extreme fantasies that I do not want to do, but it is an extreme fantasy, is to completely and be utterly drugged, so that when I'm drugged, that I have no recollection of something awful that happens to me in the person. Dogs, and the person films it and plays it back to me. That in my head is really, really sexy and exciting. Going, we've got to go and pay for these then. So it's really sexy and exciting, but fuck, I don't want to live with the after effects of having lived with that and not knowing what happens, and nor do I want the after effects of the drugs on me. It's really not healthy to, I understand that people take different drugs to enhance different situations and different circumstances. Can you truly consent to what's going on in a moment? I'm really sorry that happened to you, Andy. It must have been really scary. Jerry says, I have several friends who enjoy being beaten and have bruises that will last for days. That's fine if it's what they want, but I wouldn't do it, and I don't find bruises attractive. There are some seriously covered people, aren't there, when we look around. Heathy says that Michelle, various reasons. It's how it's look, it's how it feels, it's the proof of a good experience, the power dynamic, the tabooness, and some people like the pain. Some people like eating hot curry or playing sports, which can be intense. Dominus saying to you, Andy, it sounds awful. I understand your feel. The fear. And Jerry says, Andy, that's an example of a wank fantasy that I really wouldn't want to experience in reality. Mindful, I agree with Jerry. I have no desire to inflict bruises. Michelle says, thank you, Safi. Roy says, me too, MF. Carrie says, sometimes it's nice to press on a bruise, or if it gets knocked, it's the little blush memory comes back. Racy says, there's also talk and doing. Sometimes talking about pushing boundaries is a device in play, but it doesn't mean you will do it. This is where play should be relative to trust and consent. How much do people play with words is an interesting one, isn't it? We can tease, and that teasing needs to come with trust, knowing that person wouldn't really cross your boundaries, but might they this time? That can be quite nice, that little tease of, will it be this time? Will this change? How will this be? Can be really exciting. And it's all about safety. It took quite a few days to get over and process, Andy says. I hope you're getting some support on that. I hope that you're okay. I really do, because it is hideous. I would always go for walk away if at all possible, no matter what happens. I would always go for record if something really awful is happening. Not video, just if you've got your phone on you. It's a really good idea, and some watches will also help you as well. If you just press a button, you can record, so you're safer, and you've got some proof of what's actually happening, especially if you're making it very clear that you're not okay. Oh yeah, no, then you have to ask them to leave, or you do the opposite. You have to go in with dialing the police and saying, I'm in a really sticky situation. This person is incredibly drunk. They will not leave my flat. They will not leave my home, and I need some help and support. I don't want to be accused of anything. Please, will you stay on the line? You have every right to do that as well. A lot of people wouldn't think of that, but the police are terribly supportive. Yes, of course, stay on the line. We're sending someone now. You know, they will do that. So pushing boundaries is really dangerous. I mean, Andy, I'm really guilty of inviting people to my place. I think we have quite a few times where we have to meet people outside to make it a little bit safer until we know what they're like. But of course, then not everyone knows that that person's then going to drink when they get to your house. I would also turn around and say, please, if you're about to play with someone and they're very new to you or whatever, limit the drinking. I'm sorry, I don't want to. I had somebody come to my house and they kept pushing my boundaries and pushing, and they bought a bottle of wine and they said, no, it's just for you. You can drink it. And I was like, I don't drink. Oh no, drink it. Have a glass, have a glass, have a glass, have a glass. No, don't want to. And that pushing is really awkward, isn't it? That's a breaking of a boundary. I've said I don't drink. Don't make me drink. I don't want to drink. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't have a problem. I'll drink 3 units a year. That's kind of what I drink. No, absolutely not. Lance says, being drugged is akin to rape. Play requires extra pre-negotiation, and even having a supervised scene where a third party has the absolute ability to intervene and stop things without protest from participants. And still, it's a very iffy situation, and if the least bit questionable to begin with, don't begin. Yeah, I don't know what happened in your situation, Andy. I don't know why that person was there in any way, shape or form, and that might make a difference. So what I'm saying is, if somebody starts to push your boundaries without consent, why isn't that a red flag to you? Why isn't that a really dangerous thing? It's not okay. Cinder says, touching on safety in the UK, there's the WhatsApp 3 words app is valuable. You don't always know where you will end up. So rather than trying to remember street names, tech pinpoints your location to a very small area. It does. It's 3 meters square. That's why it's what 3 words. If you it's an app. It's really easy. They have an extra one for your watch as well, I think, and you can just say where you are. The thing is, the point is as well that I think the issue is that Andy was in his own flat and he was the man and it was his place, and I think that's a different form of threat, isn't it? I would maybe think about at that time phoning the police, asking them to stay on the line so you've got some proof, because they record what's going on. Or you can leave a voicemail with somebody, or you can just phone someone. But what 3 words started in America, didn't it? I can't remember. But so pushing boundaries in a scene, it's just completely unnecessary unless it's something you've agreed to do and it's something you really want to do. It's not a game I would play unless you really know someone and it's what you've consented to. That's the point though, isn't it? Consensual non-consent is also very different. So we have consensual non-consent. We also need to realize that we will push boundaries sometimes. Things will change. So you need to say very clearly, you have CNC, bracket, not on this bit. I don't want anybody threatening my livelihood or my family. You know, I've had people when they're talking to me say things like, I mean, honestly, this is real honest stuff. Oh, what do you think your daughter would do if I was making you give me a blowjob in the kitchen when she walked in? I think you find that's never going to happen. Yeah, but let's say it did by accident. No, that's not an accident that I'm ever going to create. It's not going to happen. And it's that pushing, like somebody, you can often tell with people that they're going to push your boundaries and go into different places. You can. Okay, right. So next week, what we have already, as I said, is what's it like for women on the scene? What's their experience? And what's the expectations of women? We're going to talk about scenes and contracts. So contracting and scenes, what does that word even mean? Somebody was asking, why do people keep talking about scenes? And we're going to be talking about all about polyamory and labels. And then the week after, Jesus, this is amazing, isn't it? We are going to be talking about ADHD with risk-taking, because this has been asked for, risk-taking and BDSM. So there's some recent research around dopamine and how the dopamine structure works around ADHD and why. So we're going to talk about ADHD and risk-taking behaviours around sex and BDSM. We can talk about triggers. People who know me, so I know I roll my eyes at that word, but I'll tell you why. So we'll talk about triggers. What do they mean? How do they work? What happens? What are the dangers? And I will focus that around BDSM and play and sex. So I'm not just going to talk about everyday life. The whole point of these workshops is they're related to this, so we'll put them into that as well. And then we'll talk about intense pain and extreme, maybe violence and marks. Why is that attractive to some people and where does that come from? Does that sound all right? So that's what we're doing for the next 2 weeks. So next week is expectations of women on the scene, ADHD. Oh, look, a squirrel, love it. It's like people usually ask if I have my doc about my possible diagnoses. Yeah, a lot of people will say, have you got ADHD? It might just be that you don't focus very well or something, and it might be you have ADHD. So we'll talk about ADHD. In 2 weeks. Next week, expectations of women on the scene, scenes and contracts, polyamory and labels. The week after, ADHD, risk-taking, triggers, BDSM and sex, intense pain, intense bruising, marking, and why they want to do that. What's the attraction to that? It could just be ADD, it could be many things. I had to stop chatting with someone who got sexually explicit via text, despite saying I wanted to establish our needs and what kind of dynamic we wanted first many times. You know what? Before we even go on, Grace, fucking awesome. That is great. That's exactly what you need to do straight away. You stop chatting. So you held a boundary. They replied with, I know what I want and I have more kink experience. I'm a newbie, but it was a major red flag. I wanted to text back knobhead, but I didn't. Do you know what I would have replied back? I think it's fantastic that you know what you want, but you clearly don't know what I want. And that is a huge red flag to me. You're not listening. I think it's great that you just stopped that. And even as a newbie, I think there's so much pressure for us when we're new because someone says, oh, I know all these things. Yeah, but you don't know me. And I use that one all the time. I'm glad you know you don't know me. You don't know my needs and you're not listening to them. And that's a huge red flag to me. Okay, so thank you very much for coming again. So as I say, really good things for next week and the week after. So if you want anything else, that'll be the week after that. So it goes on and on as well. So people are saying, thank you, you're very welcome. It's been interesting. Thank you. Enjoyed it. Thank you. You're always welcome. If you are a therapist, if you are anyone who's in psychology and you want CPD, don't forget to write to me for your CPD certificate. And if you're just a common pervert like me, I'll see you all soon. Take care. See you later. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Wank a wave. Bye. See you soon. Bye. I'm really glad you're all coming back. Thanks. Bye. Bye.